They call it Yee Naaldlooshii. From Leto Smith. Let me begin by saying this is a very real event. It seems like everyone starts off their stories like this, but I do feel the need to put that there. Because you need to take this story as a warning. I still don't exactly know what was really out there in those woods with me that night. Where I live, there's a rather large forest surrounding our home. That forest turns rather sinister when you understand that my family has had several paranormal experiences there. Both my mother and her brother have seen and heard inhuman things out there. The most terrifying experience was when my uncle heard my mother screaming for his help in the trees. When my uncle rushed to her aid, he found no one there. On another occasion, he heard the screaming of my father in the forest, but by then he knew that it wasn't actually my father. My uncle is quite familiar with the Native American legends and lore, and for a long time now, he has believed wholeheartedly in the legend of the Skinwalkers, or Yee Naaldlooshii. On the occasion that he heard my mother in the woods and ran out, he realized his mistake quickly and left the forest, but not before witnessing a dark and shadowy figure leaning on the tree nearby, with yellow eyes staring at him. When I was a teenager, I went into those woods with friends in the dark to camp, or as we called it, get drunk in nature. On one occasion, my friends and I decided to take the truck into the woods that night. My friend Jody had Greg and David load the keg into the back, and once everyone was settled, I drove my truck into the woods. Now the trails and paths here were all green and kind of overgrown, because nobody really drove down them. At one point, I let David drive, because he was better at it, and I was too afraid of popping a tire on something. So I settled into the back beside Jody, and we started to talk about some gossip. After what seemed like only a few minutes, we pulled into the clearing, the one David and Greg swore up and down was perfect and safe for camping. David managed to get the keg out of the truck. Jody and I went to gather some dry grass and twigs for kindling for the fire. We were only armed with our phone flashlights, and Jody had a hunting knife that she'd brought along with her. The woods were so quiet and eerie that day. I was at Jody's side the entire time. Out of nowhere, I saw a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. I yelped and clung to Jody. "What happened?" she asked. I explained to her the shadowy thing that I saw out of the corner of my eye. "Well, it's the woods, duh. You're gonna see some things moving out of the corner of your eye. But if you're really scared, don't worry, I'll protect you." I trusted Jody, and I admired her confidence. We continued to gather the dry brush and twigs. Once we had enough, we brought it back to the boys. They managed to get a small fire going, and with the kindling we had brought, we were able to build that up into an actual campfire. Like any teens would, we gorged ourselves with beer and pizza, and of course, s'mores. After that, we sat back and relaxed in our chairs, which encircled the campfire, keeping us warm and toasty. We all sat together drinking and eating. After a few hours, David was the first of us to get up. "I need to go take a leak. I'll be back in a moment." He let us know. Then he drunkenly stumbled into the woods, just out of sight so we couldn't see him. We all chatted and waited for him to come back. After about 10 minutes, we were beginning to worry. "I'll go and check on him. You two stay here," Greg said, walking to where David disappeared. He probably tripped or something. Probably too drunk to get up." "Be careful," I called out to him, with me and Jody still next to the campfire. We didn't talk much as we waited for the guys to return. After all, we were both kind of creeped out and worried that something may have happened to David. When the two boys sauntered back to where the light was, I was so relieved. "So what's going on?" I asked. "This idiot fell down. He ended up wandering really far into the woods." Greg answered with a shrug, sitting back down and grabbing his cup of beer. "Yeah, but I could have sworn I heard Jody calling my name out there," David said, forcing my blood to run cold. He had a look of fear and confusion on his face. "I think we should go." I sat up, letting everyone know what I thought about this. My friends looked confused at this. "Look, I know it's crazy, but my uncle used to talk about things out there. I don't think we're safe." I was begging for them to listen to me, but it was like whatever was in those woods with us understood what I was trying to do, because the sound of a cracking tree branch made us all look over to the left. "But what about the keg?" Greg asked, and I shrugged. That didn't really matter now. "Greg, come on. We need to get out of here." I continued to beg. I wanted to leave immediately, get out of that forest as soon as possible. The next thing that happened will honestly stay with me for the rest of my life. Sometimes I even still have nightmares about it. This was all 5 years ago, but it feels like yesterday. Another branch broke, and this time, something stepped into the clearing with us. Something that only barely resembled a wolf. Our group jumped and gathered up. I was behind Jody, who was behind David and Greg. Even though I was behind the three of them, I still had a clear view of the creature, and I didn't feel the least bit safe. I knew immediately that something was wrong, because this forest did not have wolves. Certainly not one of that size. The thing was eye to eye with David, and he was 6'1". He was the tallest of the four of us. "We need to get to the car," he muttered without turning to us. He seemed not to want to make any sudden movements. Smart move on his part. "Leave." I nearly fell back at the sound of it. That voice, it had come from the wolf. That's impossible. I let out a terrified scream. All common sense was out the window as we rushed from the clearing and over to the car. I unlocked the door. Greg jumped into the driver's seat, and David sat beside him. Jody and I crawled into the back, Jody clutching the hunter's knife close. Greg started the car. We sped down the narrow grassy path. The small campsite disappeared from the rear view very quickly, and we all thought we were safe. We all thought it was over, until we saw those yellow eyes peering at us through the window. I screamed, burying my face into the neck of Jody, afraid that we weren't going to make it back alive. Greg was driving nearly 60 miles per hour, which was already terrifying enough on the small and thin path. But this thing was not affected by the speed we were going. Either it was stuck to us, or it was somehow keeping up with that pace. David kept his eyes on the thing the entire time. He swears to this day that he saw that wolf-like creature smile at him before disappearing. David and Greg could never identify the point where the wolf Skinwalker disappeared, but it was gone out of nowhere suddenly. Greg continued to floor it out of the forest. Jody set me up in my seat and reassured me that it was okay. Though the thing that haunts me the most is that I saw the same thing my uncle did. I honestly believe those yellow eyes were the same one he saw that day. Though what he saw was more of a deformed man, but what I saw was more of a deformed wolf, I have a feeling that this thing changes shape, which would perfectly match the legends of Yee Naaldlooshii. To this day, I think it was a Skinwalker. The friends that I had that were there still don't talk about this event much. My father ended up having to be the one to go back the next day to retrieve the keg and other things, and to make sure the fire was completely out. He came back home with the keg completely fine. Later that night, we talked about the event. He told me that he felt as if he was being watched when he was in the woods, and telling only me, he said that he saw those yellow eyes for himself as he drove back down the narrow grass path. After all these years, I still think about the event every day. It has caused me major anxiety and paranoia. The least I can say is that my friends all witnessed it with me, and though we don't talk about it, we all know and silently agree that it really happened.